Hey Charles, what's up?
Hey man, how's your week?
It was good. It was good. It was quite a festive week since I'm in Hanoi. Everyone is
Oh yeah.
celebrating anniversary. Vietnam.
It's been a quiet week in the work week for Vietnam, I guess, because we had so many public holidays. But also it's been a little bit quiet from AI land.
Yeah,
I think the biggest news we have is about OpenAI's announcement.
yeah, that's for sure.
Walk us through it, Nam. Update the masses.
Yeah. So essentially, last week, OpenAI just unveiled an AI job marketplace and also free certification. So I think their stated goal was to certify at least 10 million Americans by 2030, which means 5 years from now. And they are already launching partnership with large employer like Walmart, BCG, Accenture, and also the United States government. I'm curious, as an educator yourself in the past 10 years, what do you think about this news?
Yeah, it's been pretty interesting. So I think there's kind of two levels of thinking about it. One is like, what is the value of an industry certification? And I think it's been a bit mixed. I think that there are certifications, for example, I think the most popular are like AWS or the various cloud platforms have different certifications and get to prove that you know those tools. AWS has had an AI practitioner certification for a long time. I haven't personally seen those to have a huge impact. I mean, they're very focused towards developers, but I think people get them. But, and I could be way off on this, but I sort of feel like if you can have job experience doing the thing that you say you can do, it goes a lot farther than someone with a certification. I find a lot of people get the certification are doing so because they haven't had that opportunity to implement some big cloud system or similar. But, you know, they're still useful overall, I think. And actually, they're quite hard. I tried to save for one. I was like, oh, this is actually not a walk in the park. So actually, I do respect people who have them. But the second question I have about this is it raises a larger question to me, which really is like, I think the question asking, confronting everyone, which is, what is AI fluency? So what do you think is AI fluency, Nam, and how do you know if someone's AI fluent?
Well, I think for me, when it comes to using AI, especially generative AI tools, I think to tell a person who understands it, and that actually is a type of question they would use when they ask for AI assistance, and how can they evaluate the output of AI assistant, and do they trust completely whatever the AI generates, or do they do extra steps to validate it? A lot of times when people say, don't you use AI for it? And what I actually see them was they just type a simple search like Google search to AI and then ask it to tell the results. I think understand the inputs and then understand how to evaluate the outputs is quite essential for anyone who use AI today. And I think that's actually interesting when OpenAI release those kind of certificates. I think the perception they want to create is AI is going to be an essential tool, like what Microsoft did for Microsoft Office. So if you look at 10 years ago, right, there's a lot of certifications training for Microsoft proficiency scale, like Microsoft Excel. I think they have something called Microsoft Access to let employees to build
Yeah.
internal database and then to use Microsoft tools to use those data. So I think it's quite an interesting view, and I think they took that case study though, make AI becoming something that's essential, and everybody has to use it. So I think that's going to be interesting.
Yeah. The thing that kind of gets me though is I think Microsoft Excel is a great analogy because you can be very good at using Microsoft Excel. And I think it's easy for me to tell. So, hey, do you know what these formulas are? Do you know what a pivot table is? Can you do this and this and this? You know, when I meet someone who's really good at Excel, they just start typing all these, like, you know, they know all the shortcuts, they know all this technical
Yeah.
stuff. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're a great data scientist or a great financial planner or something like that.
Mm.
And with AI, I feel so much about it is more like critical thinking almost, where
Mm.
like you're saying, like, right, if you use like a Google search, you're not taking full advantage of it because you're not like really thinking. You're sort of expecting it to return you a set of search results. And that's probably not the best way to use AI. So I don't know, like how do you know when someone's AI fluent, you personally?
For me, I just look at how they prompt it. So
Yeah.
is it like a very detailed prompt? Well, we touched some of it in previous episode. The meta was something using some JSON format or something like that. So the level of prompting complexity is something that I am quite interested in whenever I look at people who are using AI. The interesting news was KPMG Australia actually was released a press release that they was replacing audit analysts with 100-page prompts. So that is some sort of super proficiency there. So I think prompt is the easiest way to tell whether someone will understand what they want to get out of AI assistant, and that's what I normally look at when I tell some people whether they are good at AI or not.
You know what I think of is I think it's actually very similar to knowing if someone is a good manager or not, like a people manager.
Mm,
And I sort of think of prompting as like if someone's good at prompting, they're probably also good at like talking to people. I mean, there's slightly different skill sets, but there's a lot of overlap. It's just instead of managing humans, you're managing these bots, but it's also based on like clear communication. Do you know how to speak to them? I think for different types of people in different roles, you speak differently, right? So I would talk to
yeah,
an operations person differently than I would talk to a marketing person. I would talk to an intern differently than I would talk to a CEO. And I think those sort of things apply too to AIs. But it's really hard to have a proficiency test for management. You sort of just have to like see results and explain. So I was asked this question recently about AI fluency as well. And to me, I would just take a step back and say fluency to me is just being able to solve different kinds of problems. So I think, for example, I think someone's AI fluent if they can create, like, say, a marketing campaign, but also like a
mm,
website, but also like, a data analysis. Like I would kind of like take these different realms. And if you can sort of like solve all of them with ChatGPT or associated tools, I would rate you sort of high in fluency. The basic
yeah,
principles still apply across both. Like if you know how to prompt it really well for marketing, you should be able to sort of figure out how to prompt it for data science or for financial analysis.
yeah. That's interesting though. But for me, one of the more interesting angle I would look at would be how they set up their assistant.
Right.
So, for example, if I'm using Claude, do I set up MCP myself, or I just use plain Claude chat interface? So maybe for a marketing guy, they would set up a connector to their Google Data Studio or maybe their SQL database to retrieve campaign data or something like that. So I think to for those activities, you could probably tell when you just glance at that chat interface. They have special MCP for themselves.
No, I agree. I think like sort of, um, I speak in a lot of analogies, but similarly, like, if you're a musician, right? Say you're like a guitar player or something, you would have like you'd have all the nice guitar. So your guitar would be in tune, like how to take care of it. Doesn't mean that if you know how to do those things, you'll necessarily make great music, but it's sort of like a prerequisite. And I agree. I think you have to know a little bit about context. You have to sort of answer these questions. Yeah, I agree. Maybe that's like what we can do a quick dive on. So sort of shifting gears. What MCPs do you use and like what's been most useful for you?
Yeah. So for me, I would say MCP that I use a lot was actually the pre-built by Claude. So
Okay.
today I connect with all of my Google Workspace tools like email and then Google Files and Google Drive. So because I am a student, so most of the time I would create different projects on Claude for different MBA courses that I'm taking. So I try to create a context for my assistant so it could assist me in doing my homework, not doing it for me, right? Just assist me in doing my homework. So I find it very, very, very useful when I can almost completely personalize Claude chat for any of my MBA courses. I wish I have that when I was a college student.
Now to do a
But
deep dive into like a deep dive, right? So there's sort of like
yeah,
this is super interesting and something I've been thinking about a lot, which is, yeah, like what is the school experience like having ChatGPT? Like, what do you think like universities need to do? Like, are your
yes.
professors like Your professors are clearly aware that like GPT exists. I don't think anyone's rewritten their curriculum with that in mind. Yeah, how do universities and how does education adapt to this? I'm so curious about your experience as a student.
Yeah, so I was also thinking about that a lot. When I was entering, I was thinking that thanks to AI now I can be a much better student because I kind of have a peer learner that always be with me. But I think school and university are still in the path of figuring it out. And for my university particularly, what they're trying to do was to divide different AI usage level. So for example, level 1 is use AI for planning only. Level 2 is using AI for planning or maybe proofreading your work. And level 3 maybe use AI for everything. So I think in my university, they are still figuring it out. They don't have a very clear define of what kind of AI usage is the best for each course, but there's sort of framework that they put at the beginning of every course. And of course, they are going to use other tools to check our work as well, whether we use AI for our work. And I think that's still a work in progress for many of the educators, how to integrate AI into the education. What about your experience? How do you integrate AI?
Yeah. And to be honest, we're also figuring it out too. For us, it's just been mostly helpful because yeah, AI can code for you. So yeah, so background is we teach coding. Obviously, you can have stuff generated now, but we spend time making sure people understand what was generated. And the way that Coder School works, it's often very personalized education. We have one-on-one sessions. So we spend, I think, a lot more time being like, hey, do you understand this works? Because sort of as a software engineer, I think it's important to at least understand the basic underpinnings because A, it's not going to be right all the time. And if you don't understand what's going on in a software system, you could have really big problems later. So yeah, you sort of need to understand what it's trying to do. And as a result, even for vibe coding and things, I spend actually most of my time vibe coding. And I found that I'm like much faster than a beginner, right? Because I can see like when the AI codes something, I can be like, don't do it that way. That's going to lead problems later, things like this. But yeah, it's something that's really interesting. As a student, I assume that your AI fluency is probably like, near the top end of your class. Do you feel like school is easier for you? Do you feel like you're doing better in school? Do you feel an edge over your peers?
Why? For me, honestly, I do feel I have an edge because most of the problems that are for me, most of the problems that can be easily, debriefed by AI and then can be easily assisted by AI. But I think when it comes to learning something, there's a concept I really like, which is learning to know or learning to master it. So the path to mastery is actually very interesting because I notice a lot of the time when I use AI for AI assisted learning, it took me a little time, but then to re-explain it or to replicate the same experience without AI, uh, it's quite harder than when there is no AI. So I think the path to mastery is something interesting. How to use AI in order to help you to master a subject is something I'm still figuring it out. But I think that's going to be interesting. How do you think? How do you think that's going to impact the mastery journey? For example, how can a student master front end with AI? Because most of the code are AI generated. So do you think that helps them to master something faster, or they gotta throw themselves out there and then get their hands dirty without AI?
Interesting question. So I'll share one sort of anecdote for me, which is, so I have a friend who I know who is a very successful CEO. His company's doing very well. So he has a lot of free time. And one way he chose to invest his free time is to read all of like the beginning textbooks from year one of Harvard's like biology course or something. He wants to learn like fundamental biology and physics. And he says this is possible that he can go and learn all this stuff because he has GPT. So he's reading the book and then he just keeps talking with GPT like, what's this, what's this, what's this? And it's making him actually able to process all that information. To answer your question about like front end stuff, I've been teaching a course for non-technical people to learn coding. So we teach them how to vibe code web apps. And in the course, we're teaching Next.js, which is a popular JavaScript framework. And like people can build apps in it, but then people don't understand like, hey, what is this? What is this? What is this directory? But like when there's too big of a gap, like people are not really even able to ask questions. And so I think like a teacher has a good role. I'm like, by the way, this thing does this. And people are like, oh, okay, I get it. And then after some time, people will start asking, but wait, what about this? What about this? Like there's this folder or this file. What does this file do? And there's a very human behavior, which is to like sort of not ask that question. But like I think the switch that has to happen is like with mastery, like you now have this like infinitely patient, infinitely like customized bot that 89% of the time gives you the right answer. So if you're like, hey, I've always wondered what, sorry, this is going to get very technical. I've actually never known the answer to this question. In JavaScript, there's something called Webpack, and now there's something called TurboPack, and there's something called Vite. There's all these like build systems that compile JavaScript code, and I've never understood that system. And it's sort of like very low level kind of, and most application developers probably I would say like don't have to worry about it. But I'm just like, now I can finally be like, oh, I'm curious about this. What does this do? What are these options? Hey, there's like 25 different options I can pass this program. What do each of them do? And now I can ask these questions and I can get a level of mastery that's like much, much higher. But it requires me to actually ask these questions. And that's another part of AI fluency, I think, which is like sort of knowing which questions to ask and which the bot can answer and which the bot cannot. Like the bot can't really answer like, hey, like which of these is more elegant? Like I don't, or like, you know, what's the best way to write this code? If you're like, but you can say, hey, like what do these options do? Or like, give me the pros and cons of this option versus that option. I think it's quite helpful and it's helped me a lot with my mastery. Yeah. There are a lot of gaps actually, even as a teacher who's been teaching web development for 10 years. I discover new things every day that I didn't know.
Yeah. I think an interesting premise for AI education, especially for the ChatGPT case, was a lot of people are worrying their job is going to be replaced by AI. But then when it comes to learning something to solve real world problem, as we talked about in the previous 20 minutes, it mostly comes back to critical thinking. And a lot of the time, AI do not process that capability yet. So on your view, do you think AI would eventually possess those kind of skill, critically thinking about a topic, and then critically learn how to master that topic and achieve a level where a human is not required?
I don't know, right? So I'm thinking of this one scenario, but to bring it back to something concrete that I've been thinking about a lot today is I took Coder School server down for like 2 hours on accident because of the vibe coding thing. So what happened was, I think I can explain it simply. So basically, we have this server and it has to compile the code and then like serve this application. And I didn't check the script. And what happened was the script, like when I updated the code, it deleted the code, unpacked the new code, and then served the application. It's like, that makes sense. But actually, that's really dumb because what you should do is you should unpack the new code, keep the old code running, and because the unpacking step takes a long time, it takes like, for this particular case, it took 2 hours. So you should keep the old one running, unpack the new code for 2 hours while the old one's running, and then switch it over. And that way, like the server isn't down for 2 hours. And this is like pretty obvious, but like the AI didn't do that. And then later I was like, I prompted it. I was like, why did you, while the server's down, there's nothing you can do now because it's like the old version's deleted and like it's just unpacking the new version. I'm like, why didn't you do that? Why didn't you tell me, why didn't you do it this way? And the AI is just like, oh, great. Yeah, you're right. That is much better. The next time I'll do it that way. So like, I don't know how, that's like where my understanding of how these AI systems work really starts to falter. Like, what does critical thinking mean? Like, how do you sort of get a bot to be like, maybe I should minimize downtime, right? Like, maybe I should do these things, or could I do this thing? Or, hey, is like, I can make that faster. Like, it knows all these things. And even then, like when I ask it, like, hey, by the way, this unpacking step's taking a long time. Do you know how to make it faster? And it's like, well, you could have done these things. And I was like, why didn't you tell me these things? Like, why didn't you do that before? And so that critical thinking piece, I don't know. And I think maybe possible with brute force. My thought of like critical thinking is, imagine we have these very fast local models that, run 100 times faster in small context windows, but you're able to like run that same query 100 times. And I would ask it, are there better ways to do this? How do you speed this up? How do you do this? How do you do this? Could you emulate critical thinking? Like, instead of saying, hey, write this email, could I actually get it to be like, hey, write this email 100 times and judge all of them, right? Like, and is that the same thing as critical thinking? Does it somehow discover something new that way? I don't know. These are very philosophical questions. But I think about this a lot because I think it's also with humans. I think that's what
Yeah.
comes down to AI. I spoiler. I think like number one AI fluency tool is like number one. Did you think about using AI? Right? It's like people are just doing this work, and people are like, at Code School, I have plenty of things where it's like, hey, like write this assignment. People write it and spend a lot of time on it, and I'm like, hey, why don't you ask AI? Are there 5 different better ways to run this assignment? How can you make this more exciting? How can you make this shorter? How can what are your goals? And like people don't do that stuff yet. And I think that's like the fluency piece where it's like, do you critically think about how to use AI to help you critically think? Sort of an infinite loop.
Yeah, I think
Yes.
that's also something interesting because uh there was I think for the self-help community, they were saying something like we are only using 10% of our brain. And it could also we can also use the same analogy for AI, right? So maybe we are just using 10% of AI. And how do we unlock the 90% that we're not currently touching? So that's gonna be an interesting topic uh for the next maybe uh wave of AI.
Yes. And on that note, I think this is a good way to close it. One way I want to take advantage of that 90%, like I just said, is like I want to get more into running local models, faster, smaller things. So I'm running this MacBook M1 Pro with like 8 GB of RAM. It's getting kind of old. Thanks to some friends, I was able to get an educational discount, a new M4 Max machine. So
Whoa, that's good. That's good.
I mean, I was waiting for the M5, but like, all the rumors all the time keep changing. They're like, oh, it's going to launch in 2025. So it should launch in October. It
Yeah.
always does. But then like some things came out, saying it's going to get delayed. And I realized I didn't really want to wait a month or two. So I just got the M4. I might regret it very much in 2 months, but that's life, I guess.
But I think that the local model concept, small local model concept is actually interesting because sometimes I think, what if we can have a small but growable model on our computer? So it's like raising a kid, right? So we have a small model, but whenever we prompt them to solve a bigger challenge or maybe a bigger problem, grow itself by using it. So I think if that could be developed, it's gonna be an interesting concept because everyone can have the same thing, but then it grows along with them on their local computer and understand a very specific challenges that their maybe their bot mother or bot father have. So every small model can eventually become a mature model, just like human does.
Yeah, and there's also like, I mean, this is something we think about with company structures. So I saw a report, I forget who made it, some fancy company made this report, Carta, that told me the most obvious thing in the world, which is that Asian companies have more employees than American or European companies. And I was like, yeah, like I think sort of very much in Southeast Asia, like you have, I would say like a lot of junior employees often, as opposed to a few people because like cost of labor and these things. But I think that's also going to be interesting to think about the AI landscape as well. Would you rather have one GPT like 7 that can figure out everything, but costs you a ton and takes like is super slow? Or would you rather have like 100 like local models that like aren't that smart, but or like aren't that experienced, I guess, but like very fast and very efficient and can do simple tasks very, very well. So I think, for example, QA, I was trying to build, I was trying to clone a friend's website. But, like download screenshot, analyze screenshot, list out differences, right? Like these things don't quite need Claude level um,
Yeah.
stuff. I think it's like a lot, if it could be faster and just be done by a local model, I think 10 times faster, 10 times many people working on it would have been a better result than thinking 10 times longer.
Yeah, because like those simple stuff don't need super hard thinking, critical thinking. It's just compare one to one. And it doesn't require the whole word knowledge in the model.
Yeah. And I think in the future, and it's, I don't know, this is getting super philosophical, but I think that's what's going to happen is eventually like these Claude level models, the soda models will eventually command smaller, cheaper models. So like the tool calls and all these
Mm,
MCPs and stuff will just go out to sub agents who are more specialized
mm,
in one thing, cheaper, faster. Right now, Claude Code just clones itself, but like
yeah.
That's kind of expensive, right? So it'd be interesting.
Yeah, I think Clash we try to experiment that concept, right? If you use their research mode, what they're trying to do is they have one lead agent and then they divide it into different sub agents. And then finally the lead agent will summarize everything. And that lead agent actually supposed to be the bigger one. So I think that's gonna be the way to go.
Yeah. Cool, man. I think we did
All
it.
right. Yes,
It's good checking in with you.
absolutely. All right. Have a good one.